She sat alone near the trash bin of the station's food hall. Her arms were crossed tightly over her empty stomach. Her eyes were half closed, her small body shivering every few seconds. Her skin looked pale, with strange green lines that glowed softly. In the shadows, no one came near her, not even to ask her name. Other aliens laughed and threw food scraps on the floor near her feet. Some even kicked the trash closer to her, hoping she would crawl and eat like an animal. She never did. She only stared at the floor, holding herself still, hoping the hunger would disappear, but it never did. One tall alien with long blue arms threw a bone at her. It hit her head and rolled away. He laughed loudly with others. She didn't react. She had no strength left even to cry around them. The station buzzed with life. Ships arrived every hour. Travelers filled the air with noise. The food hall smelled of roasted meat and sweet stews. But to her, it was a cruel joke. Everything so close and yet unreachably. One corner near the back table sat a human. His name was Ethan. He watched quietly, his tray full of food, untouched. His eyes were not laughing like the others. He was not loud. He was not cruel. Ethan came to this station just 2 weeks ago as a worker. On the cargo docks, he fixed engines, lifted boxes, and slept in a tiny room alone. He noticed the girl 3 days ago, always in the same spot, always silent, always hungry. He asked a local vendor about her. They said she was a lost slave escaped from a broken ship. They said she had no rights, no ID, and no reason to be helped. They called her garbage butt. Ethan could not unsee her face, those hollow eyes, the way her fingers trembled when she tried to reach for a dropped fruit, the way she pulled back when someone growled at her that evening. Ethan took 2 trays instead of 1. He walked slowly across the hall. The laughter around him grew louder. Some clapped, some whistled, mocking him, calling him pet lover, alien feeder, hero of dirt. But Ethan said nothing. He reached her and sat down next to her, his food still warm on the tray. He turned and looked at her. Her head was down, but her eyes moved toward him slowly, afraid, like a beaten dog, unsure if this was another trick. He moved the tray closer to her and whispered softly, "You can eat with mesh." Didn't move at first. Her mouth opened a little, but no words came. Her eyes blinked slowly, and then locked on the food. Her nose twitched, her body tensed. Ethan didn't force her. He just kept sitting quietly. He picked up a piece of bread and took a small bite, then smiled gently at her and pushed the tray a little more toward her. She reached out slowly, her hand shaking as if it weighed 1,000 stones. She picked up a fruit and brought it to her mouth. She bit it carefully. Her eyes widened, her lips pressed together. The taste was real. The food was real. 1 bite turned into 2, then 5, then more. She ate fast, but kept looking at Ethan after every bite to see if he would stop her. He didn't. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them quickly with the back of her hand, as if afraid that crying would stop the food. Ethan watched her and his chest tightened. He didn't know her name, her story, her world, but in this moment he knew one thing. She was someone. She was not garbage. The food hall slowly grew quiet. The jokes stopped. The clapping faded one by one. The others turned away, unsure of what they had just witnessed, a human feeding a stray alien with kindness. The girl finished eating and leaned back, her body still shaking, but her eyes brighter now. They stared at Ethan with something new, not fear, not sadness, maybe something close to hope. Ethan stood up and picked up both trays. He looked at her once more and said softly again, "I will be here tomorrow. Same time, if you are hungry." She nodded very slowly. Her lips tried to form a word, maybe thank you, but no sound came out. As Ethan walked away, the girl touched her stomach gently for the first time in many days. It didn't hurt. She looked around the hall at the empty chairs, at the cold metal walls, then back at the spot where Ethan sat down for the first time in forever. She smiled just a little. The next day came slowly for her. Each hour felt longer than the last. The cold metal floor under her body did not let her sleep fully. Hunger was not a pain now. It was a shadow behind her, still near but no longer inside. her stomach. She remembered the taste of fruit, the smell of bread, the warmth of someone sitting close without throwing or hitting or shouting. She opened her eyes early, before the food hall lights were bright, before footsteps filled the corridor. Her small body moved quietly. She reached the corner first, sat on the same broken seat and waited, unsure if the human would return, unsure if he was real, unsure if that moment was only a dream from a starving mind. But then she saw him again, walking slowly, holding 2 trays, just like before. He wore the same dark jacket, his hair tied back, his boots old and covered in dust, but his face calm and his eyes soft, not laughing, not cruel. He sat beside her again, without a word, just placed the tray on the table and began eating, as if they were old friends, as if this was normal, as if she belonged here. She looked at the food this time with less fear. Her hands reached out, not shaking, not too fast. She picked up a piece of bread, tore it slowly, and placed it in her mouth. It was real again, and this time she chewed slowly, eyes watching his face, checking for signs, checking for tricks. Ethan smiled a little and said softly again, "You can eat with me always. You do not have to ask, you do not have to be afraid." She stopped eating for a second, stared at him, then nodded once. Her lips moved, but no sound came, not yet, her voice still hidden somewhere deep inside her body. Other people noticed again. Some whispered, some laughed, some turned their backs, but no one stopped them. No one dared to walk close. No one dared to throw food. This time Ethan spoke again, asking, "Do you have a name?" But she only shook her head. Slowly, eyes down, her fingers tightening around the fruit in her hand. Then, "I will call you Nova," he said softly, "because you shine like a small star, even in a place like this." She looked at him again, confused, then touched her chest gently and repeated Nova, her voice low like wind through a tunnel, as if it had not been used in years, as if it hurt to speak. He nodded and smiled again. "Yes, Nova, that is your name. Now if you want it." She nodded again and went back to eating, not like a wild thing, not like a beast, but like someone who was slowly becoming something more, someone who mattered. Someone remembered. Later that evening, Ethan helped her stand her legs. Still weak, her steps uneven, he asked if she had a place to sleep. She shook her head again. He looked around, then whispered, "Follow me. Stay close." They walked through the quiet corridors of the station, past metal doors and humming wires, past guards and workers and blinking lights, until they reached his room. Small, dark, warm, only one bed and a chair and a storage box in the corner. "You can sleep here," he said softly. "I will take the chair. No one comes here. You will be safe." She stood near the wall, unsure, her hands trembling again. He pointed to the bed and said, "It is soft. It will help your bones stop hurting." She walked slowly, touched the blanket, touched the pillow, then climbed up like a child, afraid to break something precious, and sat on the chair and closed his eyes, not speaking, not asking, not touching, just watching the shadows move on the ceiling. Nova looked at the ceiling too. Her body curled under the blanket, her mind racing, her heart unsure. She had never felt safe, never felt warmth, never heard her name spoken with kindness. But now she had a name, a bed, a blanket, and someone who whispered, "You can eat with mesh." Did not understand why he was kind. She did not know if it would last, but for now, she closed her eyes and slept for the first time without fear. Outside the room, a guard passed by, eyes scanning the hallway, hands resting near his weapon. He stopped near Ethan's door, listened for a moment, then walked away, his footsteps fading into silence. Nova did not hear him. She was already dreaming of green skies and soft fields, of a home long lost, and of a human voice that said softly, "You are not alone anymore." Morning light crept through the thin metal slits above the room, casting pale golden lines across the walls. Nova opened her eyes slowly for a moment. She did not know where she was. The warmth, the silence, the softness under her body felt strange, unfamiliar. Her small fingers touched the blanket, as if trying to make sure it was real. Not a dream, not a Lythan. sat on the chair near the wall, his head resting against his arm, his breath slow and steady. He had stayed awake most of the night, listening for danger, but none came. Nova sat up slowly, her hair tangled, her eyes half closed, but a small light was inside them, a spark not seen before. She looked at Ethan and whispered in a voice rough from silence, "Thank you." He opened his eyes and smiled, not wide, not loud, but kind, gentle, the same way he always did. "You are safe here, Nova," he said. "I will make sure of it." Word safe felt new in her ears, like music she had never heard before. Later that day, Ethan gave her clean clothes from his storage. They were too big, but soft and warm. She changed quickly behind a curtain. While Ethan waited outside, when she stepped out, he smiled again and said, "You look strong. You look like yourself." They walked together back to the food hall. Some eyes still followed them, some mouths still whispered, but no one threw anything, no one laughed too loud. Ethan's presence was enough to hold back their cruelty, for now they ate quietly. Nova, still slow and careful with each bite, Ethan told her stories about Earth, about blue oceans and tall trees and flying birds. Nova listened with wide eyes, as if every word was a gift from a forgotten world. After the meal, Ethan asked her again, "Do you remember where you came from? Do you have family?" She shook her head, then nodded, then stopped, unsure. Her memories were like broken mirrors, sharp and unclear pieces that hurt when touched. "I remember fire," she said slowly. "I remember noise. I remember a hand pulling me away, and then nothing. Only hunger. Only space." Ethan placed his hand on the table, not touching her, just near enough for her to feel he was listening. Then he said, "It does not matter where you came from. What matters is who you are now and who you will become." Nova looked at him with something more than gratitude, something like trust, something like light. But the peace was not to last. That night, a loud knock came at Ethan's door, not hard, not soft, but firm and sharp. The kind of knock that carried rules, the kind of knock that brought. For Ethan opened the door slowly. A tall man in a gray uniform stood there with a digital pad in his hand, eyes cold, voice flat. "I am Officer Wren. I am doing a check for unauthorized life forms. Someone reported strange activity in this section." Stood straight, his voice calm. "I live alone here. I work at Dock Bay 17. You can check my file." Wren looked past him into the room. His eyes caught the edge of a second blanket, the corner of a small shoe, the shadow of someone trying to hide. "Step aside," Wren said. Nova stepped out slowly, not running, not speaking, just standing small and quiet behind Ethan. Wren raised his pad, scanned her face, frowned heavily. "This unit is not registered. This is a category for breach. Do you understand the risk you are taking?" "She is not a unit," Ethan said. "She is a person. Her name is Nova. She needs help, not punishment." Wren did not blink, did not smile. "You have 24 hours to register her under your care or surrender. Her 2-station control failure to comply will result in removal and imprisonment." He turned and walked away, his boots making sharp clicks on the floor. Nova stood frozen, her hands clenched, her eyes dark with worry. Ethan closed the door slowly, then knelt beside her. "It is going to be all right, Nova. I will fix this." She shook her head, not in fear, but in anger. "I do not want to go back. I do not want to disappear again." "You will not," he said, his voice firm. "I will not let them take you. You are not alone anymore." That night, Ethan worked on his terminal, searching laws, reading hidden files, asking quiet favors from old friends. He used every skill he had to find a way to keep Nova safe. Nova sat in the corner watching him, her mind racing, her heart unsure, but stronger than before. She had a name now. She had a room. She had someone who whispered she mattered. And outside the room, beyond the door, beyond the silence, the station watched and waited, ready to judge, ready to take, ready to break. But Nova would not break this time. She would fight, even if her voice still trembled, even if her past still burned. She would stand, because Now she had something she never had before. Reason a cold siren echoed through the lower halls of the station, sharp like a knife through silence red lights. Blinked on and off like a warning heartbeat, Nova opened her eyes fast, heart-pounding hands gripping the blanket tightly. Ethan stood by the door, eyes fixed on the hallway, ears sharp and alert. "They are coming," he whispered, his voice low but steady. Nova slid off the bed quickly, feet landing on the cold metal floor. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. She knew this feeling. It was the same before the last time, when her people vanished, when fire rained and shadows took her away. Ethan grabbed a small bag from the locker, tossed in food, water, a data card, and a spare jacket, then turned to Nova. "We need to move now. They are searching every section for unregistered beings. They will not wait this time." Nova nodded, her legs weak but ready, her eyes scanning the small room one last time, the blanket still warm, the chair still facing the bed. The place that gave her peace for a short moment now must be left behind. They slipped into the hallway quietly, footsteps soft like feathers. The red lights flashed again, voices echoed somewhere above, guards barking orders, boots pounding metal. The station no longer felt like a home, it felt like a trapathon led her through a maintenance tunnel, narrow and dark, filled with wires and dust. They moved fast, turning corners, ducking under low pipes, sliding through broken panels. Nova never asked where they were going. She just followed, trusted, listened. After minutes that felt like hours, they reached a storage bay filled with old crates and silent machines. Ethan opened a hatch under one of the boxes. A tunnel led down into blackness. "This will take us near the cargo ships," he said, his voice a little tired but still strong. "We have to reach a friend. He owes me a favor. He might help us." Off the station, Nova hesitated, eyes staring into the dark hole below. It looked endless, like space without stars. But Ethan reached out his hand, and she took it without fear. They climbed down together, the hatch closing above them, sealing away the only safety they had known. The tunnel was tight. They crawled most of the way, their clothes catching on wires, dust filling their mouths, eyes burning from the heat. But neither stopped, neither cried, neither asked to turn back. Suddenly, a noise above, a shout, then boots running across the metal floor above them. Ethan paused, held his breath, covered Nova's mouth gently. They waited like shadows in silence until the sound faded away. When they reached the end of the tunnel, a broken panel led to a loading bay filled with crates stacked high, dim lights flickering above. Ethan peeked around the corner, then waved to a man standing near a ship door. His name was Jor. Thick arms, oily clothes, eyes that looked like they had seen too much. Jor saw Ethan and frowned. "You said you were done with this, Ethan. You said no more trouble." Ethan stepped forward. "I need help. One pass off the station for her. She is not safe." Here Jor looked at Nova, his face unreadable, then shook his head slowly. "You know what they do to people who help runaways now? The law is tighter than before. I cannot risk my license. She is just a girl." Ethan said, "Not even grown, not a threat. Just someone who wants to live." Jor sighed deeply, looked around, then handed Ethan a small card. "This will get her on the night shipment, but only her. I cannot take both. You understand?" Nova's eyes widened, her hands reached for Ethan. "No," she whispered. "I will not go alone, not again." Ethan knelt beside her, his hands on her shoulders. "You have to go, Nova. This is your chance. If you stay, they will find you. They will hurt you. You can find safety out there, and maybe even find your people." Nova shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I found my people," she whispered, "and you are the only one I have." Sound of heavy boots came closer, guards shouting this way. Someone saw them near Bay 9. Jor pushed open the side door. "Now or never," he yelled. "Go now." Ethan stood up, pulled Nova into a tight hug, his arms shaking, then stepped back. "Go, Nova, run and do not look back." She stared at him, her heart breaking, her body frozen, but his eyes were firm and full of hope. So she ran. Her Feet hit the floor hard, her breath fast, her body flying past crates, through doors, down ramps, every step further from the only one who ever saw her as more than nothing. Behind her voices, shouted footsteps. Followed lights flashed, but she kept going, clutching the card in her hand like it was life itself. She reached the ship door guards just seconds behind, and leaped. Inside the door slid shut, the lights turned green. Engines hummed. Nova collapsed to her knees, shaking, crying, whispering. Ethan over and over, like a prayer, like a promise, like a goodbye. Outside on the station, Ethan stood, hands raised, as guards surrounded him, his face calm, his voice silent, but inside, his heart still ran with her hand. Far away in the stars, a ship carried a girl with a name and a reason to live. Metal cuffs clicked around Ethan's wrists, cold and tight. As the guards pushed him down the hallway, faces around him watched with blank eyes, some curious, some mocking, none brave enough to speak. The tall officer in charge walked ahead holding a datapad listing Ethan's name, his crime, his fate. Without pause, without mercy, they took him to a holding cell, small and silent, with one hard bench and one blinking light. He sat without speaking, eyes fixed on the floor, his thoughts far beyond the walls, thinking of Nova, thinking of her running through the cargo bay, her small frame disappearing into the ship's shadow, carrying hope and fear in equal weight. Hours passed, maybe more. No one came, no questions asked, only silence and the hum of machines outside the door, until at last footsteps echoed again, slow and heavy. The door opened and a figure stepped inside. Not a guard, not a stranger, but someone Ethan once called friend. Rian walked in, tall in uniform, his badge shining under the dim light. A face Ethan trusted once, a face now full of guilt and something colder. He stood in front of Ethan, arms crossed, voice low. "I told them where to find you." Ethan looked up, no anger in his eyes, only sadness. "Why?" he asked softly. Rian looked away, hands clenching. "They threatened my family. They said if I did not report you, I would lose everything, my home, my wife, my kids." "I had no choice." "There is always a choice," Ethan said, not shouting, not blaming, just speaking truth. I'm sat across from him, face heavy with shame. "I thought they would just warn you, not arrest you, not hurt." Herthan shook his head. "You knew what they would do. They treat her like property, like trash. And now?" "She is alone again." Rian pulled a small chip from his pocket, slid it across the bench. "This holds a location, a contact, someone off the grid, someone who helps people like her. If she finds him, she might be safe." Ethan stared at the chip, then looked back at Rian. "You can still do the right thing. Help her from your side. Find her, make sure she reaches someone who sees her as more than an Umbarian." Stood slowly, his voice cracking. "I will try. I owe you more than words." He left without another sound. The door closed again, leaving Ethan with nothing but silence. And the chip, meanwhile, far away. The ship carrying Nova drifted through space, inside cold metal walls. Her small body curled near the vent, her fingers still gripping the boarding card tightly, her eyes wide and wet with tears around her machines. Beeped softly. Cargo containers stood tall and silent, and no one noticed the girl hiding in the dark. Hours turned to days. She ate small bits from the food pack Ethan gave her, drank little, slept less, always listening for danger, always remembering his voice, his touch, his promise. One evening, the ship docked at a midline station, old and rusted with low gravity and dim lights. Passengers left, crew unloaded goods, and Nova slipped out through a broken panel, her steps light, her eyes scanning every corner for safety, for help, for signs. She found an old terminal near the service deck, touched the screen, entered the chip. Rian had sent coordinates, blinked onto the map, a planet unknown, not marked in major charts, a place called Virianava. Took a deep breath, eyes locked on the path ahead, then started walking again through alleys and side decks, stealing bread when no one looked, hiding in crates when voices grew close, always moving, always remembering Ethan's words, always hearing him whisper, "You are not alone." Back on the original station, news spread Fast, a human worker arrested for harboring an unregistered alien. Some called him a fool, some a criminal, but others whispered a different name, Hero, one of the guards who watched. Ethan, bring her food every day, began to ask questions. He went through records, checked logs, watched footage again and again, each time. See not a crime, but a kindness, each time wondering if he too had been blind-wined, moved softly across the surface. A Viren, cold and silent, carrying red dust through the narrow paths between broken homes and metal shelters. Nova walked alone past flickering lights and whispering crowds. Her clothes torn, her feet bare, but her eyes steady, each step took her. Deeper into the refugee zone, where forgotten voices waited and silent names were stored in old data files. She had arrived days ago. Hungry, tired, afraid, but something inside her had refused to break. Something held her together, something Ethan gave her, not with weapons, not with orders, just with kindness and truth, and the soft whisper, "You matter." She stood before a worn building with faded marks above. The door language, she could almost read lines her memory tried to shape into meaning. An old woman opened the door, her face wrinkled, her arms marked with the same glowing green lines that ran through Nova's skin. Without a word, the woman stepped aside. Eyes wide, lips trembling, and Nova entered the room filled with books, old tools. Maps from lost worlds and screens showing forgotten stars. The woman placed her hand on Nova's shoulder and said one word in a tongue Nova never heard before, but somehow understood. Welcome. For the next days Nova stayed inside that place, eating, learning, asking questions. The woman named Alira told her stories of a race called Uver, a peaceful people of science and light, wiped out in a single war, buried in silence by those who feared their minds, their unity, their power. Alira scanned Nova's arm with an old device, her eyes filled with tears as the machine blinked and confirmed what her heart already knew. Nova was one of the last royal daughters of Elvari. A child hidden during the final invasion, saved by a rebel ship, then lost to space when that ship was destroyed. The glowing lines in her skin were not sickness, they were signs of ancient code. Bloodlines connected to galactic pacts. Long forgotten, Nova was not just a refugee, not just a girl, she was a living treaty, a symbol of balance. A voice once silenced, now returned. Alira handed Nova a pendant covered in symbols that shimmered in her hand. This belonged to your mother, she said softly. She was my sister, she believed you would come back one day. Nova held it tight, memories rushing back, flashes of a soft voice, a warm smile, hands holding her as fire fell from the sky and screams tore through the air. She remembered now the final words spoken into her ear as she was placed into a stasis pod. Survive, become more than them. Far away on the station, Ethan sat in a new cell, deeper, darker. No sound, no light, no questions, only waiting until one day the door opened and a tall man entered, dressed in black with silver edges. His voice sharp, "I am from the Galactic Records Bureau. We have reviewed your case, and recent reports suggest your actions may not be criminal, but historically." Thon raised his head, eyes tired, voice dry. "What does that mean?" They man placed a small hale on the table. It showed Nova standing before a council on Viren, her voice clear, her skin glowing, her name displayed beside ancient emblems. She is not just a girl, she is Elvari Royal. Her presence changes everything. Alliances, borders, laws, even your arrest is now under review. Ethan smiled weakly, his heart filled with something heavier than relief. Pride back on Viren. Nova faced the small council members from distant planets gathered in silence, all eyes on her, her voice steady. She spoke of her journey, of the laughter she endured, of the hunger that nearly killed her, and the human who gave her a seat at his table. "I am Nova of Elvari. I do not ask for a throne, I ask for space for others like me. I ask for laws that see us not as data, but as lives, and I ask that those who helped me are not punished, but honored." The hall filled with silence, then nods, then quiet words of support. Her pendant glowed softly, her voice stronger than any wall, stronger than any weapon. Outside, children ran through the dust, laughing, chasing light. Drone's old men watched with eyes that held sorrow and hope, and somewhere deep in that place, a statue was being made, not of a warrior, not of a queen, but of a small girl. Offering food to another hand, open heart, open spirit, unbroken, Nova walked alone. Again that evening, but not lonely, she passed a screen showing news from across systems, reports of Elvari. Revival of station officers being questioned, of one human named Ethan, whose trial had turned into a celebration. She paused, watched his image. Smiling in chains, a name spoken by millions, not with anger, but with respect. Then she whispered softly to the wind, "Thank you. Ethan, you gave me more than food. You gave me my voice." And, as the stars lit the sky above Viren brighter than before, Nova closed her eyes and felt the galaxy shift, not with war, not with fear, but with the quiet power of truth. Returning home in secret, he sent a message through old lines to a contact near TN. Viren, asking if a small girl with green-lined skin had passed through, asking if she was safe, if she was alive. The answer came days later. Brief but clear. "She is here. She is strong. She is learning." Keith sat in his cell, head leaning against the wall, eyes closed, a small smile on his face. He did not know the message. He did not hear the words, but somehow deep inside he felt them. Nova was still running, still fighting, still alive, and maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had not broken her yet. And far across the stars, under a sky filled with strange moons and whispering winds, a girl once laughed at, once starved, once forgotten, now stood taller than ever, her feet on solid ground, her hands holding books, her voice learning to speak again, not in fear, not in silence, but in strength. A warm sun rose over the green hills of Viren, its light golden soft, touching the tops of shelters, the glass domes, the wide streets filled with voices no longer broken. Nova stood on the balcony of the learning tower, her eyes scanning the horizon. Where peace lived, where the sky sang with colors, not bombs, not fire, not fear. Below her, children played near the fountains. Their laughter, a melody she once thought never belonged to her kind. She turned back into the room where council members sat. Around a great circular table, flags of many worlds hung above them. Whispers filled the air, soft but filled with weight. Every face turned toward her, every eye waiting for her words. She no longer felt small. She no longer shook when silence fell. She stepped forward, her pendant glowing softly against her chest, her voice steady and calm. She spoke of history, not to bring revenge, but to remind them what silence had stolen. She spoke of kindness, not as weakness, but as power, the kind that changes galaxies. Without ships, without blades, without fire, she told them about the human who saw her when no one else did, the one who gave food without asking for anything, the one who sat beside her when others mocked. "His name is Ethan," she said, "and without him I would not be here today. Without him, I would not have remembered who I was. Without him, I would not have survived the laughter, the hunger, the cold." The hall remained still, not out of doubt, but out of honor. Her voice had reached their hearts. And something old, something forgotten had returned to life, the meaning of unity, the strength of compassion, the truth that no being is too small to matter. Nova sat at the table. Now, not on the floor, not in the shadows, a seat made for her, a voice welcomed among stars. Beside her sat Alira, her aunt, her guide, her memory of Elvari reborn. On her other side sat a new guest, brought from the far edges of the system. Hands still bound, eyes still confused, but alive. Ethan, he had been brought to Viren under protection, not punishment. He stepped into the room, unsure of his place, unsure if his presence would bring shame or danger. But when Nova stood to greet him, when she wrapped her arms around him in front of them all, the room understood the story better than any words could explain. She led him to the seat beside her, not behind her, not hidden. Beside her, where equals sit, where voices rise together, where peace begins. "You told me I could eat with you," she said softly, "today. I tell you that. You can sit with me, not because I saved a world, not because I wear a pendant, but because you saw me when I was nothing and made me feel like something. Ethan knotted his throat tight, his eyes shining, but he spoke nothing, only placed his hand on the table beside hers and let the warmth speak for him. The council declared the Elvari recognized the ancient laws, restored new treaties, signed with her signature carved into history. Her words turned into education, into programs, into change across system. Stations that once rejected children like her now opened doors, built kitchens, made places where no one would sit alone ever again. Schools began teaching about the hunger not as shame, but as warning not to forget how cruelty begins not in war, but in the eyes that look away. Nova visited those places often not as a ruler, but as a voice walking through halls, sitting beside small girls and boys, reminding them they are seen, they are not forgotten, they are not trash. She kept Ethan close, not as a hero, but as family. He worked in the Learning Tower, helping build centers where humans and aliens worked side by side. His hands that once lifted crates now lifted hearts. His stories taught to others, not to praise him, but to inspire them. In the quiet hours they would sit outside under the stars, sharing meals, not in silence, not in fear, but in joy. Nova always saved one seat beside her, always placed two cups, always smiled when Ethan arrived, sometimes late, always tired, but always there. One evening she asked him, "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" He smiled, leaned back, looked at the sky, and said yes. I whispered, "You can eat with me." Nova nodded, held up her cup, and whispered back, "And I still am." They laughed together. Not out of sadness, not out of survival, but out of life, real life. Where hope breathes, where kindness wins, where the smallest act opens the largest door. And somewhere far beyond the stars, on an old station, now cleaner, now kinder, a child sat alone near the edge of a table, eyes wide, stomach empty, until a worker in a gray coat walked over, placed a tray beside her, and whispered softly, "You can eat with me."